Good morning. I would like to draw your attention to Exodus and chapter 20. Exodus and chapter 20. We're going to read the first few verses of that chapter. As a matter of fact, they constitute the so-called 10 Commandments, or the Decalogue. So I'll read that, and then I will focus on verse 14. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep their commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. Now all the people witnessed the thunderings, the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. Then they said to Moses, You spoke with us, and we will hear. But let me read that again. You speak with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. And Moses said to the people, Do not fear, for God has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin. We'll be reflecting on verse 14 this morning. You have been following a series of studies in the 10 Commandments, and you will know that the first 4 commandments, or the first tablet as it is sometimes called, relates to our duty toward God. And the next 6 commandments, or the second tablet, as it is sometimes called, relates to our duty toward our neighbor. In regard to this second tablet, you have already considered our duty to honor father and mother, as well as not to murder. This morning, I want to speak on yet another duty, directed at our neighbor, and it is the seventh commandment. It's found in verse 14. Very simple, very clear. You shall not commit adultery. That's what we'll be thinking about. And there are three things I would like us to consider about it. What it assumes, that is to say, what the commandment assumes. Secondly, what it forbids. And thirdly, what it promotes. What it assumes, what it forbids, what it promotes. Let's work through that, beginning with what it assumes. It assumes marriage, because adultery is a violation of marriage. It's a violation of the marriage covenant. So it assumes marriage, and more precisely, the sanctity of marriage. Marriage is a formal, solemn, public, and binding agreement between a man and a woman to become a husband and a wife. And they make this agreement before God. They basically are committing themselves to lifelong companionship as husband and wife. In this covenant, they promise to love one another and to be faithful to each other in all circumstances. Come thick, come thin, they promise to be faithful to each other. Marriage is therefore a sanctified relationship. Sanctity is defined as the quality of being holy or sacred. Marriage is a holy thing. Marriage is a sacred relationship. And it is holy, first, because it was instituted by God. Adam, when he was created, was all alone. Every other creature had a partner. And God looked upon him and he saw that it was not good for him to be alone. He decided there and then to make a helper suitable for him. Sent him into a deep sleep. While he was sleeping, he took a rib out of his side, and from that rib he met the woman, and then he brought her to the man. It was God's idea. He instituted it. Secondly, when people are getting married, God is a witness, whether they like it or not. But if they are Christians, they deliberately call God to witness. And God's witness, God's presence there, makes it holy. And then thirdly, it is holy, it is sacred, it is sanctified because it is a picture of the relationship between Christ and his church. That relationship started first. And it started in eternity. That relationship is what should be expressed in any relationship between a husband and a wife. And this commandment we are looking at here assumes the sanctity of marriage. Secondly, what it forbids. You will notice that the commandment is negative in character. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not. It is forbidding the commitment of adultery. Let's pause just for a couple of minutes and answer a number of questions about adultery. What is adultery? When he forbids them from committing adultery, what is he talking about? The Hebrew word, which is translated as adultery here in English, literally means breaking the wedlock. Breaking the wedlock. In the Jewish context, it indicated that a man who was either married or unmarried would have had sexual intercourse with a married woman. He may be married, he may not be married, but he has sexual contact with a married woman. In doing so, he commits the sin of adultery. He breaks the wedlock. He destroys the troth. A troth is your pledged word, your promise. That's a troth. When you promise that you will love him or her, forsake all others, cling only to him, so long as you both shall live, you are pledging your word. You are pledging to be faithful. When you commit adultery, you are breaking that pledge. That's what adultery means. Secondly, what does adultery violate about marriage? Marriage is assumed. Adultery violates that assumed relationship. What does adultery violate about marriage? Well, first, it violates the covenant. We started out by defining marriage as a solemn, public, and binding agreement. That's just another way of speaking about a covenant. Adultery violates the covenant. It breaks this lifelong covenant that God was called to witness to. And he is not the only witness. He is called to witness. A congregation is called to witness. Sometimes you have legal witnesses. Father and mother are called to witness. And a marriage can never be a binding covenant without witnesses. And this, that you were prepared to pledge, to vow, you break it when you commit adultery. You violate it. It's a violation of the covenant. It is also, secondly, the violation of the coitus. I'm using a Latin word. The sexual relationship which should happen only in the context of marriage. The writer to the Hebrews, in Hebrews chapter 13, refers to it as the marriage bed. The marriage bed. Adultery makes the marriage bed impure. Impure. Third question on adultery. What is sinful about adultery? Well, first, it is going against this law. Okay, verse 14 is a law, part of the 10 Commandments. It's a law. And the one who gives this law is God. And the commandment says, you shall not commit adultery. When you commit adultery, you go against the law of God. So it's a transgression of the law. It's a transgression against God, because it is God's law you are breaking. It is God who put this law together. And when he creates human beings, the first place where he puts that law is their hearts. So you are born with this law on your heart. You are born with the consciousness that a thing like that is wrong. And then God wrote it down on tablets of stone for the nation of Israel, for the Jews. And when we become Christians, he rewrites it upon our hearts. It is his law. We sin against that law. We sin against the one who institutes the law. This is why God is grieved when it happens. This is why adulterers, people who don't repent from the sin of adultery, are sent to hell. Grieves God. It is a sin against God. It is a sin against those who commit it themselves. You sin against yourselves. That is what adultery forbids. This commandment forbids. Let's move on in the third place and look at what it promotes. It's cast in negative language. Do not, as other of these commandments are. But in fact, it is meant to promote something positive. And what does it promote? It promotes fidelity. Fidelity. Or faithfulness, if you like. Two people who have covenanted with one another, a man and a woman, to become a husband and a wife for life. In order for them to keep their vows and their promises, they must strive to be faithful. Indeed, they are meant to be faithful. Genesis chapter 2 verse 24 says, after God has brought Eve to Adam, Adam exclaims and says, now this is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of the man. And then in verse 24 we read, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. He will leave, he'll cleave. To cleave is the idea of bringing two things together like you would two pieces of paper, and you have them glued to each other. And you cannot separate them without tearing the one or the other, because they are not meant to be teared. So they cleave. He lives to cleave. That suggests fidelity, suggests faithfulness. There can be no cleaving where there was no fidelity. We can define fidelity as the quality or state of being faithful to promises and duties we commit ourselves to when we get married. The state of being faithful to promises and duties we commit ourselves to when we get married. Marriage thrives on fidelity. Where there has been a breach of the fidelity, there is often insecurity and fear. There is unhappiness and anger. There are destructive patterns such as domestic violence, mental illness, and even divorce, which God hates. Fidelity will, on the other hand, lead to positive benefits, which will include trust. Trust. Fidelity is therefore a serious need in any relationship, but particularly in a marriage relationship. But this leads us to the question, what does it look like? What does fidelity look like? This is what this commandment is encouraging. What does it look like? Well, according to Hebrews 13 and verse 4, it involves honoring the marriage. Honoring the marriage. This, of course, means you must have a high view of marriage. You must know, you must realize, you must believe that it is a sanctified relationship which should be carried out in a holy manner. And you must endeavor to treat it with respect. It means cleaving to each other, persevering in the relationship even when challenges arise. And challenges do arise. Marriage is not that unrealistic picture that Hollywood sometimes paints and that you dream of and imagine. It's a beautiful thing, but it comes with challenges. Some challenges come from the heart. And when they come from the heart, they may take the form of lust. You are married, but you are still lusting after people you're not married to. It comes in the form of discontentment. You have a wife, you have a husband. As time rolls on, their beauty or handsomeness is waning. They're beginning to look older, less flashy. And you stop liking them. You begin to like others who look younger, who you are not married to. Discontentment. The challenges can come in the form of temptations that come to all, and we are living in a very difficult time. A time characterized by special temptation, even for the married, especially in the realm of sex. You only need to take a moment to look at how many young women dress these days. They dress to reveal, not to hide. Dressing was ordained to hide our nakedness. They dress to reveal their nakedness. When you do that as a young woman, even married men are affected. Sometimes young women behave as if when you get married, you are no longer affected by that. They are. So you can actually contribute to breaking a marriage. You can contribute to breaking a marriage because of your adultery with a man who is already married. You only need to look at what is shown on television, what is present on internet. On most adverts, an advert about soap has a scantily dressed woman. an advert about a car has a scantily dressed woman. All of that is meant to feed the eye of men. And those things contribute to the breaking of marriages. Adultery these days is regarded as a private activity between consenting adults. So, you may be consenting adults, but you are married. You're both married, but you are consenting to have sex with someone who is not your spouse. All of that brings pressure to bear on a marriage relationship. What about the carelessness that characterizes friends, male and women? They work together, maybe they are married, and they are friends, and their friendships are not innocent. They are emotionally involved, but they call it just friends. They are supposed to be married. You also have those who live apart. The husband lives in Australia, the wife lives in Zambia. And in Australia, he sees other women. And here in Zambia, she is also surrounded by men. The temptation to cheat is very high when you put such a pressure on a marriage. When you relate to members of the opposite sex without drawing boundaries. Men are men and women are women. There have to be boundaries. You can't relate like you are married with members of the opposite sex. You must draw boundaries. Yes, you can be friends. Yes, there are such things as platonic relationships, but there must be boundaries. He can come only this far. When he goes over this line, it's danger. Run away from him and run away from her. Also, and I want to make this the last point, you promote marriage, you promote the desires of this commandment by nurturing fidelity, nurturing it. Those who are married need to dwell together, not apart. They need to nurture their relationships, their communication, their romance. They need to nurture their spirituality. How close you are to God often determines how healthy your own marriage will be. So your relationship with God is absolutely critical. And when you do get married, most of you here are not, remember that. Constantly renew your promises to each other and assure each other, and guard your heart. Guard your heart. Guard your eyes. And guard your legs. All of those things will contribute to fidelity. Well, this, I suggest, is what the commandment is promoting. So remember what it assumes. The fact that marriage is sacred. Remember what it forbids. Anything that will violate this sacred relationship. And remember what it promotes. Fidelity. If you are planning to marry one of these days, remember these things. If you are married, practice these things. And may God bless you all. Amen.